I'm flabbergasted at just how good a model this is. With or without the flatbed wagon to act as extra pickups, it seemed to run perfectly well without any issues with stalling or juddering. Hi there everyone, welcome along to another video here with me, Jenny Kirk. It's great to see you, I hope I find you well. And today, well, I just couldn't help but hang with the cool kids, and this is a model that's been out for a while. It was one of the highlights of the Hornby 2019 range, and indeed Hornby did really well with the 2019 range, sweeping the board pretty much on a lot of categories for their models, and this one rightly seems to have done very, very well. So I thought, with Rails of Sheffield and with Hattons both having these on special offer at the moment and with more liveries on the way, I think you've guessed it. This is the Ruston 48DS, and this video is in association with our sponsor Train-O-Matic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories, designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts to be intuitive and reliable, that work just out of the box without any need to fiddle with CV settings. Come with me, let's take a look at this Hornby model. Here she is. It's the Ruston 48DS from Hornby, and the DS stands for diesel shunter, in case you're wondering. The 48 is 48 horsepower. You might think, actually, that's a bit of a weedy locomotive, but these little things were pretty good at moving a lot of freight. It took them a little while to get up to speed, and that speed was probably just about walking pace, but they were pretty good for shunting stuff about. They proved pretty popular, being made by Ruston, and were sold for over quite a long period of time, and were available in both narrow gauge and standard gauge form. So a pretty successful locomotive, and you'll see them out and about on preserved lines a lot. A lot of them do survive, and I believe that one or two may have actually survived in commercial use up until comparatively recently. Indeed, in the Hornby 2020 range, there's a Grant Rail yellow liveried version, which I believe that ran through to at least the 1980s, late 1980s, possibly into the 1990s and beyond. So these are actually pretty long lasting and suitable for so many different scenarios. This particular one is catalogue number R3706, Ruston and Hornsby 48DS, and flatbed wagon in army livery as number 802. And you can see up there it says DCC ready. What it actually takes is a 6-pin decoder. And stay tuned for the towards the end of the video, I'm going to be showing you how to DCC fit this in association with our sponsor Train-O-Matic decoders. Now, the military used a number of these on places like ordnance depots, where the fact that they were an internal combustion engine meant that they didn't leave a plume of smoke during wartime, which would have enabled them to be spotted. But also, if these are going to be trundling around explosives, you don't really want something with a big naked flame in it. It's not conducive to safety. So these were actually really great for these sort of tasks. And as you can see as well, it comes with a flatbed wagon. This is the Hornby Conflat A, I think it is, but it has the means to couple it directly to the locomotive, and this wagon includes additional pickups, and you'll see when we get to the locomotive just how small this is. And whilst it will run on its own, if you want to massively improve reliability, you can keep it paired to the appropriate shunter's match wagon, the flatbed wagon. It's standard packaging from Hornby. Nobody really likes to dwell on the box, but we've got a little bit of additional detail here, and this, we're going to get to this towards the end of the review. This is to do with when you come to DCC fit it, and there's a couple of different things to note there on the electrical connections that go across to the flat wagon, and this is really important. And I actually found this a little bit fiddly when I did this for the DCC fitting, but you can get through it. It's just a very tight fit, and you've got to push them right back. That'll make more sense when I come to the DCC fitting guide, so do bear with me on that. So I'm going to pull all this out, and what we actually have in here is surprisingly, for some reason we've got 3 couplings. Seem to have burst out of the bag's not sealed, but 3 couplings, and I think I know what they are for. They're giving you, right, I do see now. So when I take it out, what you'll see is that it's presented already coupled up to the flatbed wagon, which is this Conflat A, but there's no coupling on the front, so that's where one of these couplings is for. And then 2 other couplings to go in between. And that just means if you, for whatever reason, don't want to run this with the flatbed wagon, you can separate them out. They've got this drawbar assembly with this separate 2-prong wire connector. They are a little bit fragile, so do be careful when plugging and unplugging them. Let me just see, there we go. Get it lined up and it just plugs straight in. And by having this semi-permanently coupled drawbar, it means it's not going to put any strain on that wire. And when I've got this upside down, you can see that the wagon has a little bit of extra weight in, but then it has pickups on all 4 wheels, which are feeding in addition to the pickups on the 4 wheels of this really pretty little diesel shunter. And that actually makes it more reliable than even some of the small 6-coupled locomotives. So when I've had this running, it's run surprisingly well around Weir Yard, both with and without the flat wagon. But of course, when you're going over point work, it's probably best to have it paired up. Now, I'm just going to separate these out, and what I will show you is it's quite easy to do. And the actual coupling drawbar here is, let me just see, it clips in place into the coupling mounts on there. And actually, if we look in these couplings, one of the couplings is not on a NEM fitting. It's got this different clip-in fitting, and what that belies is that this wagon is based upon a much older Hornby tooling, and they've kind of adapted existing tooling that they had rather than completely tooling up a new wagon. The wagon itself isn't actually too bad. I'm just going to push that coupling in there just so you can see it clips in, and then that's just an ordinary conflat wagon. You can run it in an ordinary goods train as a conflat wagon if you don't want to pair it with the locomotive, and that's absolutely fine. But of course the wagon does have those pickups. The electrical connection to those pickups is only at one end. You can just see it there. From the side you can see it does stick down a little bit, but not too obtrusive. Now the wagon itself, it's actually not too bad. I was a little bit worried when I saw that this was a kind of repurposed older tooling, but actually it does appear to be one of the better older tooling, and we've got brake rigging that does actually match up to the wheels. So I think that Hornby have put a few little improvements into this, and it's actually well worth it. You know, the finesse around the W-irons isn't as fine as we've seen on some of the completely new tooled from scratch wagons, but it's still perfectly presentable. The moulding of the sole bar detail of the wagon is crisp and sharp. We've got all of these chain pockets in there. The planking on the top has just a few of these mould parting circles. It's not too bad, but it's something that actually, in my opinion, this wagon does cry out a little bit to have some kind of a load put on here, which you can use to put additional weight in. And also, if you're creative with your wiring, it may even be possible to add in one of those smart power packs to go in conjunction with the decoder in the locomotive to really improve the running characteristics of this package. But as it's presented out of the box, it's still pretty reasonable. It's lettered up as an internal user for the army, for the military, and each of these Conflat A's is actually lettered to match the locomotive it goes with. So if you buy one of the other different liveries that is available. The actual, whilst it's the Conflat A wagon, it's lettered to be an internal user to match the company that the locomotive is lettered to. The buffers, they're solid, not sprung, but actually they're pretty nicely done. They're just a plastic moulding, so the buffer heads are a little bit chunkier than what you get with the more modern wagons, but actually this is still a pretty presentable wagon. Those pickups on there, whilst they do give a little bit of drag to the wheels, it's not an excessive amount, and actually I found that the locomotive doesn't really struggle to pull or push this in the slightest. The wheels, single-spoked metal wheels, and the pickup is pretty good from these. Turning to the locomotive itself, this really is the exquisite part of this package. The weight on this is actually pretty considerable. I mean, when you look at that, compare it to the size of my hands, and even to the size of the match wagon, this Conflat A that it comes with, it really is a tiny locomotive. And yet, Hornby have managed to bring this to the market. DCC ready. It runs reliably on its own. It runs reliably with the match wagon. It runs pretty well on both DC and DCC. There's just I can't really work out where the weight is. It's almost like it's made of some kind of super dense metal. I'm blown away by the amount of weight that they've managed to get into this without compromising the cab interior. It's completely open in that cab, and it's so nicely done. It feels like a lot of this model is effectively die-cast metal, and it's one of the ways that they've got the weight up. But it does feel a very exquisite model. This wire here, it does unplug from the other end. Just really want to be a little bit careful. You don't want to put too much strain just on the plugs themselves, and I suspect that you can see that the connection it goes into is just held on a set of wires. I'm going to leave that be, but it does come out if you want to run this locomotive on its own. The buffers, now these really are exquisite. Turned metal, they've got these quite characteristically big faces, just like the real things, and that wasp stripe on the back, that is ever so sharp. I mean, it's like a dazzle camouflage. It plays tricks with your eyes because of its sharpness. There is just no fuzziness that I can see in the demarcation between the yellow and the black. We've got flush glazing on the back of the cab, and when I run my finger over that, it really is very flush. And other raised detail, again, feels really nice, really strong. The roof is a very slender, thin piece. When you look there on the edge on, it's, I don't know what, is it a separate, it must be a separate metal piece, but it is really actually quite well put together, and this whole thing feels like a very solid, well-built locomotive model. Looking into the cab, it is pretty basic. Against the light, you can see the glazing bar that's been used front and back. That is a little bit of a detraction, but not massively so. And there's actually plenty of room in there for, actually, a crew of 3 would fit into this. You know, you could have a couple of squaddies hitching a lift, playing trains for the day, along with the driver. And certainly in preservation days, I've had a cab ride in one of these, and no doubt some of you will have as well. They are around at some of the smaller preserved lines, and it's well worth trying to blag a cab ride. They are such a lovely little machine with a lot of character to them. The bonnet sides, again, it feels like it's a metal casting, but it hasn't compromised any of this relief detail. The louvre detail on the engine doors, it's all there. It's all nicely done. It's sharp. The sole bars of this locomotive, pretty thick and chunky, but I guess the real ones were as well. So what you see here is a very good, accurate rendition of the real locomotive. And, you know, I guess that the locomotive builders had to try and put a lot of weight into these to give it the adhesion to be able to pull the loads that they did when they were shunting. The wheels too, I mean, I just love these wheels. They're so nicely done. They've got this like 4-hole front disc face, and they really do look beautiful. We've also got representation of the axle boxes, brake shoes that line up. Just because it's a small model, the detail has not been compromised. Turning it over, you can also see the sandpipes. Everything is there. And then we've got the all-wheel pickup, all-wheel drive. And you can see there with the gear chain, you've got access to lubricate if needs be. The rest of the tempo printing and paint finish really is superb. There's not a lot of lettering on this, but what you do get is crisp and sharp, and they're really upping their game. Army 802 appears on both sides of this locomotive absolutely brilliantly. I do love that, and the demarcation between the green on the sides and the wasp stripes is really sharp. On the front of the locomotive, again, we've got more of these crisp, sharp wasp stripes, and we've got a radiator grille detail that actually does have a lot of relief in there. It does look the part. Drawbar hooks are fitted as standard, and these are metal, which means that if you want to use instanters or tension lock couplings, you can with these as factory finished. We've also got these guards along the front that would have been, I guess, to make sure that it didn't run over and derail on any foreign objects. One thing I will warn is when you come to DCC fitting these are a bit of an issue. Looking face down, the black of the cab roof is nicely done. Again, this kind of satin black, not too matte, not too gloss. It really works well. And the green as well is just perfectly realised. All in all, this is just such a superb package. The other little detail as well, which I've noticed that is really nicely done, is that there's these kind of lifting eyes on the chassis. There's 4, which I'm guessing would have been used to, with the aid of cranes and chains, this could have quite easily been lifted and loaded onto something else, taken from army base to army base and used where required, and just made it so easy to get this on and off the track. And these lifting eyes, they feel like they're metal. They're certainly very, very durable, and I can actually see light through them. So if I turn this onto its side, you can see all the way through those lifting eyes. On the side of the cabs as well, we've got separately fitted metal handrails, really nicely done, and again, really durable. And on the front of the cab, we've got that characteristic rectangular windowed shape, all nicely done, and all of the front bulkhead fittings that you would expect to be there. One of the other little points I just want to make you aware of is if you want to fit the coupling on the front of this, at the moment it's got a blanking plate fitted into the NEM socket. What you're going to have to do is just tease that out, and that can be quite tricky once it's in place. But once that comes out, and don't lose that, that reveals the NEM socket where the little tail of these can just clip into place. And there it is, equipped with the front coupling. And it really does show just how tiny this model is by just how big that coupling looks. It's amazing how small they've been able to make this model. To DCC fit this locomotive, you'll see 4 little screws down there in each corner. This is where it can get a little bit tricky. It's not too complicated, but you just have to undertake a couple of little steps. This is where that piece of paper that was in the box comes in. As you can see here, it makes great note of these, and you'll see there, these are the actual connections for where the power across to the flatbed wagon goes. And to get into this, I'm going to have to just try and get this unplugged, and this can be a bit fiddly. Don't just grab it and yank it, because you're liable to snap the wires. So what I'm going to do is just try and separate that out. She really doesn't want to play ball here. There we are. So we want to remove that, and what you'll see is actually these are so prone to breaking. I'm sorry, Hornby. But that's broken during the point of doing this, and I was trying to be really careful. So you're just going to have to be ever so careful. A little dab of plastic weld, something like that. You'll never see that, but really you just have to be so careful. And I'm now going to have to follow the instructions that are on this piece of paper. I need to make sure, and I guess the best way to do it is hold it down and push it in. It's just so difficult. Just to make sure that they don't foul. Now I need to find my small crosshead screwdriver, and these 4 screws, we just undo them, and then essentially what you've got to try and do is to separate the chassis from the top without getting these caught underneath there. Oh, it's there. And then the whole chassis just slides out. And you can see there inside the model, there's a lot of decent space. And what's quite interesting is there is space back into the cab. That's not immediately obvious when you look in the cab, but it does mean that if you want to fit something like the Train-O-Matic Smart Power Pack, it's possible to fit that into the cab, and there is a way through there, right through into the cab. So you can see there, the screwdriver pops all the way through, which actually gives pretty good access. The chassis itself, there's a lot of weight in here, and that is a tiny motor. And what I've chosen to use is the Train-O-Matic 6-pin decoder with the direct plug pins, and that just plugs straight in. The Hornby model, whilst it uses the 6-pin interface, it's only using 4 of those pins. So if you really needed to, you could always hardwire as well. But that's what I've chosen to do. We can also see on there we've got the solder tabs for putting the Smart Power Pack, should we so choose. Putting it back in is pretty easy. Just got to make sure that the decoder doesn't jam on anything, goes down into the chassis first, and then it's simply a case of making sure that these power connectors just don't jam as they go in. And you just see at the front there, should just slot home, and then all that's left to do is tighten these screws. Don't over tighten them because you'll strip the threads. It's all they need to do is just hold everything in place. You don't need to go all Wayne's World with an air gun and tighten them until they squeal. And there you have it. The locomotive is now DCC fitted. And now we turn to the score for this model. First up is finish. And actually, the locomotive itself, there really isn't anything particularly to fault. The finish is really sharp, really nice. Those wasp stripes, there's no bleed over on there. Everything that should be there appears to be there. It really is a nice package. The conflat wagon, whilst there are some nice touches here, it does feel like an older model. Hornby have improved some aspects of it, and it does hold its own. But when it comes to things like the parting shots from the mould on the top, it isn't quite up to the exquisite standards of some of the more modern tooled wagons. So for finish, I'm going to go with a 9.2 out of 10. And I have to say that of that score, the locomotive itself is probably pulling most of that weight, if you pardon the pun. And actually, when you buy this package, the locomotive is what you're buying the package for. And it's interesting to note, I did suggest to Simon Kohler, and it remains to be seen whether it's something they might follow up on, but wagons like this that can be bought separately, and the fitting of these connecting plugs into some of the smaller locomotives in the range, such as the ex-Lancashire and Yorkshire Pug, the W4 Peckett and the Sentinel diesel shunter, might actually be a really good addition to the range to really improve slow speed running over Inslefrog points. Functionality, Well, this model really does work well. With or without the flatbed wagon to act as extra pickups, it seemed to run perfectly well without any issues with stalling or juddering or any problems with dealing with minor dirt on the track. So actually it surprised me. With a model this size with this shorter wheelbase, I was expecting it to be temperamental, but it wasn't. So for functionality, I'm going to give this a 9.9 out of 10. Ease of use. Well, a lot of this, I guess, comes down to how easy it is to get the couplings in and out, how easy it is to DCC fit. And there were a couple of aspects which just bugged me ever so slightly. The problem with this wire connection going across here, it just seems a little bit fragile the way it's connected to the locomotive, and I can see that being an issue for some people to get that plugged and unplugged without causing dry solder joints. These wires are quite thin. That said, if you're never going to uncouple these two items, it's not really a problem, and those who do, you just got to make sure you're careful. When it came to the couplings on the locomotive, I did think that these NEM pockets were actually quite innovative. Getting the blanking out once it's in, that could be a bit tricky, but it's the sort of thing you only ever need to do once at most, so not really a major detraction. The big thing for me is the fragility of these bars across the front. Unfortunately, as you can see on this, both of them ended up cracking in trying to get into this to DCC fit it. Other than that, the ease that you can get inside this model to DCC fit was actually pretty good. It's one of the better designed models, but these little pickup points for the connection across to the wagon really bring home that these bars, maybe making them out of metal, perhaps a kind of a springy metal, or even a springier plastic that's less likely to crack and more likely to just bend out of the way, would be a way to go. So for ease of use, I'm afraid I'm going to have to knock this down to a 7.7 out of 10. When it comes to aesthetics though, this locomotive really does have it covered. I can't find anything to fault with the locomotive itself. It's just the more you look, the more the detail that should be there on this rugged, utilitarian locomotive is there. And it could have been so easy to just make this almost a basic blob, but they haven't. They've brought this locomotive to life so well, and it's a prototype that I don't think anybody would have otherwise dared to take on, so Hornby have to be applauded for taking on this model. The conflat A behind it, as we said before, doesn't quite live up to the expectations that the locomotive gives, but you're not buying this package for the conflat. That's an added extra for reliability if you need it. So aesthetics, I'm going to give this a 9.8 out of 10. Value for money. Well, this for me is another area that this model really does shine. They're currently on offer from a number of retailers, and we've got affiliate links down below if you really fancy this diminutive beauty and want to pick up one of your own. And the prices that I'm finding them out there for £60, £65, £69 tops really does offer amazing value for money. It's... Well, I'm flabbergasted at just how good a model this is. Even if it had have had temperamental running, I think the beauty of this model, the smallness of the prototype, would have carried it a long way. People almost would expect a model of this size and the stature of this to be a temperamental runner, but it's not. And the fact that it can be got for this really favourable price just gives this a 10 out of 10 for me on value for money. And that brings us to the final overall score, and I've really been impressed by this model. It's available in quite a few different liveries. We had 4 out last year, of which this is one, and there are a number that have been announced in this year's catalogue as well. And this whole package has come together to give us a very respectable 46.6 out of 50. We really are getting through some real gems of models. We are spoilt rotten, and my thanks goes out to Hornby for doing this, for taking the risk and bringing this to the market. Thanks. this is just what industrial modelers and small shunting layout modelers have been crying out for so many years. Well, I hope that you found this video really informative, and also we got that little DCC fitting guide in there. I think it's really important to show people how comparatively easily these can be DCC fitted if that's the direction you want to go in. And don't forget as well that you can follow the affiliate links down below. These take you to the Hattons website and the Rails of Sheffield website. Now, they don't cost a penny more through these affiliate links, but it really does help out the channel and helps us to keep making the videos that you love. If you're going to buy one of these, you buy it through those links. Don't forget to like this video too, and share it and let other people know about it, and look back through our back catalogue. There's lots and lots of stuff on there. This channel is about far more than just reviews. And also don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already done so, and click that bell and you'll be the first to know about new videos as and when they go up. But until next time, it's been really great having your company, and I hope to see you again. Bye for now. Today's video is sponsored by Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders designed to be fully compatible with every manufacturer's locomotive. Visit train-o-matic.com to browse the full range and see what they've got suitable for you. I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon. And an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Michael Churchwood, Anthony Hunt, William Wade, Wayne Johns, Offshore Allen, oorail.co.uk, Tepic, Michael Lockie, Helen Sink, and Peter Bolton. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.